Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate the attendance here. Can everybody hear me?
You can turn this mic.
I don't.
Oh, it is on.
So I am the environmental branch chief for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Many of you know me. I see a lot of familiar faces, some I don't see. So welcome. I appreciate you being here. So I am representing the co-chair, Mr. Vincent. The base civil engineer is not feeling well today, so I'm taking his place. So first order of business, we will need to ask for community members, RAB members. And then also appoint a RAB co-chair. So before I do that,
We have 3 yeses.
I want to go over what it means to be a member of the RAB, just so you know what you're signing up to. So to be a member, you need to reside within Greene and Montgomery counties, and then either work or live on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that's requirement number 1. Number 2 is unfortunately, you don't get any money for serving as a RAB member, so all your expenses to get here and whatnot are borne by you. You're expected to attend all of the meetings that we have or send an alternate. And so we've been having what, annual meetings?
Yes.
Or as needed. So right now we're doing the meetings annually.
We're going to start holding them biannually.
Okay, so twice a year. So that will be the commitment there. And it's a 2-year term appointment, so all the previous ones have expired, so that's why we're doing this now. So a 2-year term appointment. What else? So those are the main responsibilities. Anybody have any questions with regards to that? So on the sign-up sheet, we had just 3 folks put on the sign-up sheet that they wanted to be a member. Is there anyone else who would like to be a member or have any questions as far as what membership is? Okay. So if you would, I'm just going to call your name up. If you could just stand up and introduce yourself in that way, because we will also then ask if any of the members want to be the co-chair. So first one, Dwayne.
I actually don't live in one of the 2 counties that you mentioned, so I don't think I can technically.
Okay.
I live in Butler. Sorry.
Oh, wait, you know what? Hold on a second. I think there's a provision for regulators. Government agencies, community groups, citizens may be nominated
Yep.
to the board. I don't know if it's accepted. Well, you could be a member if a member nominates you as an employee of a government agency.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm Dwayne Tolson. I work for Ohio EPA. I'm the site coordinator for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. And then we have Alex.
Alex Herring, been on the board 6 years, I believe, as a civilian co-chair. I worked for Beaver Creek Township. I was the township administrator, just retired now. I'm the township fiscal officer. Got a hazmat background, still carried my certification. So we're talking about parts per million and trillion.
All right, thank you. And then Paul.
Yeah, Paul Lamberger. I used to work at Mount Lab for 4 years. I'm representing legal women voters. Apparently they have a seat on the board. That's me.
Okay.
Let's see where else.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
All right.
You can tell me questions.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be a member?
I'd like to nominate him.
Somebody second the nomination?
Oh, as the co-chair, you mean? Well, do we need to take a vote on the members?
No, I think just because we really don't have any that are, the people that want to be members, they're members.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Well, I'm sorry, I arrived just a bit late. I think I have been a member. I'm Matt Hensey. I'm from the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission.
Well,
answer.
yeah, technically the membership expires after 2 years, but if you want to be a member, then you can't, I mean, we're kind of opening up to new membership right now.
Do you need a nomination letter from my employer?
No. In the future, we would, technically, members would nominate other members, but since we're kind of starting from scratch, you just want to stand up and introduce yourself, and we'll include him as a member.
Okay.
I'm Matt Lindsay. I'm with the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. I'm the manager of environmental planning there. In that job, I do a lot of water quality planning work across 5-county region, which includes Greene and Montgomery counties. I'm also doing climate work right now and other things like that.
Did you sign in?
I did.
Did you mark yes to be a member?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So, we have we have a nomination. I would ask for a second and then a vote.
For the co-chair, you mean?
Yeah, he nominated
Mr. Zariev, did you nominate Mr. Zariev for the co-chair? Do we have a second? All right, congratulations, sir.
Okay, so, all right.
All right, we good? All right, so, yes, sir.
What influence do these 5 of us have? Do we ever get to vote on something, or is it just advisories, or?
Yes.
Endorse?
No, so the purpose of the Restoration Advisory Board is to promote community awareness and obtain constructive community engagement with Wright-Patterson Air Force with regards to the installation restoration activities that goes on here, the cleanup activities that goes on here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Let me see here, according to the charter here, yeah, you have the right to review documents. We can ask you for review and comment on those documents within regards to the environmental restoration program and submit comments to us to review and provide back responses to the community. So you're also authorized access to any documents, studies, information have been placed in the public repository.
For all the new RAD members, we need you to sign our new charter, and I'll distribute it to all the new members and yourself.
Well, when we hear your speeches, your presentations, if there's something that we don't like, can we raise a question and say that doesn't sound like a good way to go?
Yeah, so that's the purpose of this meeting, is for us to share information with you and to get your input. Get community input. Yes, sir.
No questions until the end.
We can probably, I mean, let the briefing go through.
I was looking here, and it talks about, on the slides, it talks about, you took samples, but you never say what the results were.
Okay, well, we'll let John and Joe and Greg get into the presentation.
Question until the end?
Yeah, yeah.
So at the end, we'll do this, but you can sign to Mr. Vincent, and then Alice can sign it. Look at that, I pre-filled it out correctly. Well, you can wait till the end.
Okay.
We'll do it later.
Sir, you ready to get into your presentations? All right, thank you.
Oh, we got that taken care of. Next slide, Andy. Hi, my name is Joe Ferenz. I'm a remedial project manager here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And first, I'm going to talk briefly about some PFAS facts and information. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS, or synthetic organofluorine compounds, used in industrial consumer products such as nonstick cookware, water and stain-resistant fabrics, carpeting, some food packaging, and aqueous film-forming foam that the Air Force started using in the 1970s. Next slide. It wasn't until 2016 that Wright-Pat began sampling for monitoring wells for PFAS. The Air Force then conducted a site inspection in 2018 and an expanded site inspection in 2020 and identified 26 AFFF sites to be investigated during the Phase 1 remedial investigation. The fieldwork for the RI began in May of 2022 and is currently ongoing. Next slide. In 2016, the US EPA established non-enforceable drinking water health advisories, also known as HAs, for PFOA and PFOS. And in May of 2022, the EPA issued regional screening levels for 6 PFOS compounds. And in 2023, RSLs were issued for 2 additional PFOS compounds. And the difference between an HA and an RSL is that HAs are used to identify the concentration of a contaminant in drinking water at which adverse health effects are not anticipated, and RSLs are risk-based concentrations used for site screening to identify areas of contamination. Next slide. On this slide, we list websites of the US EPA, the CDC, AFCEC, the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, and Ohio EPA, if you want to learn more about PFAS. Next slide. As an RPM, I'm overseeing the Phase 1 remedial investigation for PFAS at Wright-Pat. The goal of the investigation is to determine the nature and extent of contamination, identify potential exposure pathways, and collect data to support a risk assessment. The initial phase of the field work began in May of 2022 at 14 AFFF sites. During that time, we installed 79 monitoring wells, 13 lysimeters, and 26 soil borings, and collected 220 groundwater samples, 220 soil samples, 48 lysimeter samples, and 51 surface water and 61 sediment samples. On 23 October of this year, our contractor mobilized to the base to conduct the next round of sampling needed to delineate the extent of PFAS at each site. Next slide. This slide shows a couple of some work from last year. The picture on the left shows 2 contractors. The gentleman in the background is logging the core that you see, and the person in the foreground is using a VOC meter to record VOC concentrations. And the picture on the right is the drilling crew installing a monitoring well using a sonic rig. Next slide. This slide shows the AFFF areas in Area A. There are 21 AFFF areas in Area A, and there's one off base, the Harrier crash site, located near the interchange of 675 and 70. Next slide.
I have a question. Is it okay to do a question now? Just about this map. There's lines with a 5-year time of travel boundary. Is that for Dayton's well field or for the basins?
I believe that's Dayton's. I can confirm that with you.
All right, thank you.
Next slide. This slide shows the four AFFF sites that are located in Area B. Next slide. As I stated earlier, we continue to do quarterly sampling on base where we collect samples from 14 monitoring wells. The last event was in September of 2023, and our next event is this December. Based on the 2023 data collected in February, there are 3 wells above 70 parts per trillion. One of the wells is on the base boundary and 2 are in the interior part of Area A, and I'll show you those locations on the next slide. Compared to the 2022 RSLs, there are 13 wells above the PFOA RSL, 5 wells above the PFOS RSL, and 9 wells above the PFHXS RSL. And there are no wells above the RSL for GenX, PFBS, or PFNA. And to address these exceedants, the Air Force has taken several actions, including the remedial investigation I previously talked about, and we're moving forward with the implementation of a non-time critical removal action at 3 sites.
F stand for?
Aqueous film forming foam. Next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the monitoring well network for the Sentinel wells. This well here, GR 416, is at the base boundary. That exceeds 70 parts per trillion. And the two wells over in this part of the base, MW19D and MW6I, also exceed the 70 parts per trillion. Next slide. Another one of my projects has been to complete an engineering evaluation and cost analysis at 5 AFFF sites. These 5 sites are AFFF areas 4, 11, 17, 22, and 23. All of these ECAs have been prepared and have been obtained concurrence from Ohio and US EPA. There was a 30-day public comment period from June 26th to July 25th, but no comments were received. Currently, my contractor is preparing action memos, and we anticipate implementation of the INTICRAs this fiscal year. I want to add that based on the RI data collected to date, the Air Force has decided that it will not pursue the INTICRAs at Area 4 or 23, and will only be implementing the INTICRAs at areas 11, 17, and 22. Thank you. Non-time critical removal action. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg Plamondon.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm Greg Plamondon, another RPM here at the base. And of the 26 AFFF sites, I have 2 of those. Through the SI and the expanded SI, they were deemed to have the highest priority and in need of mitigation systems to prevent down-gradient migration of PFAS impacting soils. And one of the sites is in Area A, that's AFFF Area 21, the current and former fire training areas, where they use the AFFF foam, of course, for firefighting and practicing and things like that. The second site, this is 21, this is the blow up. Second site is AFFF area number 1, and there's the blow up of it. That's a hazmat storage facility where there were 2 releases, one of a concentrate over at this end, and then one of the foam coming out of the fire suppression system that malfunctioned. These 2 were rated the highest priority for the base to address first because of their potential for down-gradient receptors. The fire training area is adjacent about 100 yards away from the Mad River. Area 1 is in direct contact with outfall number 1 that is upgrading to the City of Dayton well field, and one well in particular that has been shut down.
It's interesting that those are the highest priority, and it seems like they're critical, but the first word up there is non-concrete. How does that?
The non-time critical, it's still on a rapid response project through the Army Corps of Engineer. It's it's technically on the time of completion. For these sites, for both of these sites, after award of contract, we were in the field within 6 months. And so the time critical, I'm not sure of the exact difference, but this was on a very tight time schedule. Bonnie, please.
Time critical basically means that you have 6 months or less planning. It's something that has to happen right away. Not quite as fast as like an emergency response, but pretty quick. And these particular projects, they need a little bit more time to do the planning associated with implementing what they're actually doing. They needed to go out and do some additional sampling, do a data gap analysis, try to figure out what the best way forward was to implement it. So it takes a little bit more time. Also, when it's a non-time critical, it allows for public involvement. That's why the engineering evaluation cost analysis, the means that you have to evaluate what you should do with these sites as far as what action you should take, that's why those went out for public comment.
Thank you, Bonnie. Appreciate that.
It sounds like a bureaucratic a permission to do a bureaucratic foot dragging. And if nothing happens in the next 4 years, it's fine.
I don't know about
Is
that.
that the wrong kind of conclusion?
Probably so. Yeah, we anticipate treating water within, at the first site that we're working on, Area 1, within the month. Next slide, please, Andy.
Yeah, well, so what that's a regulatory term. So as Bonnie explained, the time critical is 6 months or less. No, this is over 6 months, meeting certain requirements. And so, as Greg said, this is a very fast-moving, it was awarded on a fast-moving project to get this accomplished.
This doesn't have to be done within 6 months. Nothing has to be done within 6 months.
We had to be in the field. We had to,
That's a contract requirement, that's not the
That would be
requirement
critical.
for a non-tick road.
That would be critical. So this is non-critical.
Non-time critical.
So how long can you do nothing?
So,
How much permission do you have to wait, to do nothing for 5 years?
so we're not doing nothing. So Bonnie, can you kind of explain that a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, it's not that they're not doing anything, they had to take some really important steps as far as doing a little bit more work. Because before they actually started these actions, they had very limited data. They had maybe a few sample locations. And so, in order to define what area they needed to do and how they needed to clean this up, they needed to do more work. They needed to do what is basically called a data gap analysis, go out, collect more data, define the area that needed to be under the removal action, and then they needed to evaluate what types of treatment and what types of, basically what that removal is going to be, how to install the treatment, what made sense, all of those types of things. And that takes a little bit of time, and they have to evaluate some of this stuff. And then, like I said, non-time critical has a public involvement component. So those have to go out for public involvement, because the thought is, previously, on time critical and emergency actions, there's no public involvement, because you're trying to do it so quickly. These things, because they take a little bit more planning and a little bit more evaluation, they have time to get public involvement.
Has any work started with the one that's 100 yards from Bad River? That's really close.
we haven't started breaking ground on that site yet, with the exception of the data gap investigation. The system is designed. We're finishing up Area 1 first. We'll be moving over to Area 21 next week. We're starting to go get tractors
But they
over.
also have all the extraction wells in that they're going to be using to collect the groundwater. that
Yeah.
they're gonna treat. So they have part of it.
You want me to continue on with the explanation? Andy, why don't you go ahead next, please?
Another question. What, if these are non-time critical, what would have to be different to make them critical? Or you had emergency, and then you had something else, and then you have non-time critical. So what would?
An emergency response, most likely, with a direct impact, an immediate impact for endangering.
We would have had to do it, it would have had to been a time critical removal action, and we would have had to been out in the field within 6 months of identifying the issue.
And it would have to be something you can do in 6 months.
So there was a newly
Like
identified
an
site
estimate
where
situation,
there was
putting up a
contaminants.
fence. Yeah, something like that.
Where there was a newly identified site where there was highly contaminated soil that was discovered. And it was clear that soil needed to get dug up, put in a roll-off bin, and controlled right now. That's a time critical removal action.
Okay.
Where we have a diffuse sort of
But
release
but
to the
because
environment.
because of what it did not get, because the concentrations were too low?
Because these sites did not have enough data to say, I know where the dirt is to dig up and box it up and haul it off. And that we were concerned about groundwater, which is a more difficult thing to achieve a removal action in a short period of time. The time frame goes past 6 months and we're not allowed. It's a definition of the documentation that has to be done. It doesn't mean that things weren't done, it's when you can get that work done. And if it goes too long, 6 months, then you're in a different set of documentation that has to be completed, and it gets a different name. It isn't necessarily how critical it is, it's very much about what you can get done in an extremely short period of time.
And like Bonnie said,
There's a fire out there and you're gonna wait more than 6 months to put it out. You're 100 yards from the river, as the gentleman said. And that doesn't shake anybody up.
both of these sites had to have systems designed, and to complete that design, we had to go out and do the data gap investigation, and they were conducted simultaneously. Both sites were being investigated. Subsurface, surface water, subsurface soil, groundwater, surface soil, they were all being evaluated so they could go into the design of these two systems. The, and under CERCLA, each phase had to go under public review, the ECA, Environmental Assessment Cost Analysis. They had to go out for evaluation and public comment. That was addressed. The action memo, that also went out for public comment, and that was addressed. And so now we can proceed with, we had to proceed with the designing of the systems and going through state of Ohio for concurrence on a lot of that documentation. And so that brings us to another part of the data gap investigation was a pilot treatment study to determine which media was best suited for the groundwater conditions at the site. That was at the fire training area. This is a little rundown of the documentations that are completed to date and the dates. So everything's been improved and we're in the construction phase. Andy, next one. This is a schematic of a conventional PFAS treatment system. It's a granular activated carbon system with the solid vessels in the lead and lag configuration. The lead vessel does the primary cleaning and the lag vessel does the polishing to meet discharge criteria. System like this with a set of 4 treats the Area A groundwater, and they're commonplace for other PFAS treatment throughout the country. Next slide.
And what's the flow rate through that?
From the 2 base production wells, that treats, Raymond, about 1,200 GPM, 1,500 GPM? 1,200. 1,200?
1,200 GPM, and what's the concentration coming out?
Non-detect?
What's the concentration coming out?
Non-detect.
What's that?
Not detected.
What's that number?
The laboratory can't detect it. Depends on
And
what
what is their
laboratory.
sensitivity?
Depends on what laboratory. What's the laboratory detection limit?
It's around 2 parts per trillion.
Thank you.
So what we decided to construct in the sake of saving space and hardware, the conventional system was considered to go here. This is area 1, by the way. We decided to put in a series of treatment basins. And one of the main components of this system is this purple line right here, which is a groundwater capture trench. In area B in the uplands, the soils are so tight that an extraction well system would not work. But the sand stringers that are intermittent throughout the area were feeding the surface water drainages. And that's where the impact, the downgrading impact came. It's the surface of the sand stringers feeding the drainage basins that went down gradient to outfall 1. So the capture trench was installed instead of extraction wells to passively capture water throughout this area. And again, this is where 1 release occurred and this is where a 2nd release occurred. And this is from right to left going down gradient, down slope. And so this will capture the groundwater in this area. And for any sand stringers that do get into a drainage, we have a capture basin here. It's an expanded version of the pre-existing scour basin, we called it, that the culvert emptied out to. So we're capturing and treating both surface water and groundwater at this site. The system consists of pre-treatment basins right here, and that's sand, and we're also going to have a biological treatment. And they will feed, just like in the solid vessels, a primary treatment going into a polishing basin, and then that will be sampled and discharged to the existing drainage alongside the site. That currently receives the drainage, or did receive the original drainage going from the sill side. Next, Andy?
Your color thing said that that ditch essentially was capturing.
Yeah.
So how big is what's the capacity of your capture system?
That
Like you mentioned that would intercept
yeah.
the flow, not capture.
Go back one, Andy, if you would. So this is a 420-foot trench. It's dug from top of soil down to a 30-foot clay layer, clay layer at 30 foot. Clay layer itself sits on top of bedrock. Groundwater itself is 15-foot static water. And so that entire trench is full right now, and it leads to a sump right here, and then this conveyance piping will take it down to the treatment system.
Okay. And the treatment's going to be carbon?
It is not. It is not. It's a engineered clay called organoclay, and this particular model is made by Florazor.
But it absorbs like carbon?
It does absorb like carbon. And based on the pilot study that was done in Area 21, the organoclay actually held up better, and it was better suited for this application. Okay, now next one, Andy. So this is an end shot of one of the basins, and this was a series of prefabricated building blocks that are assembled, and this will eventually be, it is enclosed now, and each of the basins, the primary and the polishing basins, they hold 20,000 gallons of water, and that's interstitial pore space after the media has been put in place, the organoclay is in place. And so, since we're basically treating a relatively small flow rate from the original drainage, they'll be in those basins for a couple of days prior to discharge. Way over designed, it's non-detect, it will be non-detect coming out. And since we put the slide deck together, these basins have been completed and lined. And if you'd like to see the materials that go in place, it starts off with a felt layer that goes on top of the bottom of the basin to prevent any abrasions. It'll then we'll have a liner, a plastic environmental liner that will go on top of that felt. And on top of that liner goes a geotextile membrane. It's like a waffle configuration that allows water to pass through it. And it also has felt on either side so it doesn't get damaged in any way. And on top of that is yet another layer that's similar to the first layer.
And that's all sitting on this gray gravel here?
Yep.
And what's the width of that channel?
That going across is about 12 feet. And so all the gravel at the bottom is compacted, that had to meet requirements. The felt layer goes on top of it. One layer, solid layer, the geotextile, and then another layer on top of that. And the middle layer, the geotextile, has a leak detection system built in, so we'll know if the first layer fails. Next, Andy. The capture trench was dug by this monster right here. It's the one-pass trenching by DeWind, and it's like a gigantic ditch witch or a chainsaw. That arm extends down into the soil 30 feet, and then it progresses around the site. It moves at about 2 feet per minute, so the 420-foot trench was dug in a day and a half. While the trenching tool is excavating soil, it is also laying this pipe right here at the bottom And that's the capture piping. And on top of that, from this hopper right here, in this conveyor belt, pea gravel is put on top of the piping. And so they move along 2 feet per minute, doing multitasking as they go. And at the far end, and we'll be able to see this in a little bit, is the sump that the entire trench drains to. Andy? That's the sump I was referring to. So everything on that 420-foot trench drains here, and then that will be pumped down to the treatment system. We anticipate it'll produce about 20 to 30 GPM. With those tight tills, it's just not going to produce a lot of water like you'd see in sand and gravel. Next.
Is that pumping automatic?
With float switches, yes. This is fire training area 5, which was right here. That was the historic use of the PFAS and the current training area here. And quite a bit different, this site configuration and characteristics, geologic characteristics. This is sand and gravel. This is all alluvial, hard, coarse material. So we were able to put in a series of extraction wells, these 7 extraction wells, along the down gradient boundary of the site. They're completed, coincidentally enough, down to 30 feet to the top of another clay layer. Depth of water is about 12 feet. So these 7 extraction wells are going to produce capture, and that was proven through modeling all across the site. So the entire down gradient boundary will be captured. So all the extraction wells are plumbed to the to-be extraction system. The 2 pre-treatment basins are here. They will feed there's going to be an aeration phase here, then the pre-treatment basins, primary, polishing, another aeration pond before it's discharged to the backwaters of the MAD. And like we were talking about earlier, the data gap investigation and why it took so long to actually get it underway. We had to have design parameters and information to work with. And we have new monitoring wells throughout the site, soil borings. We had to run pump tests to see what the productivity of the formation would be. All that goes into the design of these systems and what type of pumps to size them with. Next, Andy, I think that might be it. It is. Yep.
Just any questions for Greg? Okay. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. And Mr. John Crocker's next.
Hi, I'm John Crocker, RPM here at Wright-Patterson. And the work that I've got going on right now involves surface water and groundwater sampling that the U.S. Geological Survey has been conducting in order to support the work that Greg's been doing. What we've done is we've collected samples of surface and groundwater in the areas that are associated with the PFAS remediation sites, and we'll use that data hopefully to document how effective the treatment systems are that get installed. So right now, let's see here. Just went through the goals. FY24 funds have been requested to continue this work, and we're waiting for money to drop to continue the sampling activities for the USGS. Right now, they're on hiatus. Next slide, please. So in supporting Greg's work, here is where Greg's treatment system is. Outfall 1 is down here. And we sampled for USGS the drainages that were associated with the hazardous waste training, hazardous waste storage facility, and got baseline data of concentrations at the site and below the site where the scour basin was. And then more importantly, in the area of outfall 1, where the discharge from the site is, we have been conducting a really large amount of sampling. We installed an auto sampler that collects daily grabs from the outfall. We do stream gauging of the discharge from the outfall. Those measurements are recorded every 5 minutes and have provided us a good baseline data set. So when the treatment system comes online, we'll be able to look at what changes the treatment system
result in, and hopefully we've got good documentation of the benefits that it's provided. Next slide. So we've got a large amount of data, and it allows us to start looking at how variable things are relative to, for example, this data is outfall 1. We have concentrations. We have mass flux, which is the discharge times the concentration, and then we have concentration measurements, or I've got that backwards. Yeah, this is concentration. And concentration measurements, and the overall things that we're starting to see is that the amount of mass that's coming out of outfall 1 stays pretty consistent. The flux day in, day out does not have huge variability, but when we see storm events, you start seeing that these boxes get bigger, and that indicates that we're seeing more variable data sets. So we get spikes in concentrations when we see big storm events. Next slide.
Is nanogram per liter a part of the trillion?
Yes.
Yes.
So data collected at outfall 1, you can see that overall the average daily discharges concentrations are pretty consistent over time. This is a couple years of data, and that storm events result in some pretty sizable peaks. Outfall 1 is a very flashy outfall. It, in addition to draining the small drainages next to the hazardous waste building, it receives all of the runoff on the inactive runway complex at Area B. That all goes out outfall 1. So when we get a good storm, we see a really big jump in discharge from that outfall, and that's one of the things that
What's the vertical axis?
the vertical axis on this particular one is
Yeah,
concentration. So this would be PPT.
no, this is flux.
Oh, is that the flux? Oh, is it flux?
Yeah,
Okay. So this is micrograms per second? So micrograms per second.
PFAS. I thought you were talking about water.
Well, these are actual chemical concentrations and how they change, and the peaks that we see when we have storm events.
Okay.
So I think the major message is that,
Changes with rainfall.
yes.
Get to watch that at some place.
It could represent sediment loading also, and some of that getting picked up in samples by the auto sampler. It isn't necessarily perfectly cut and dried that we're liberating contaminants. Next slide. So in addition to my USGS sampling, San Antonio is having the USGS conduct perimeter sampling around Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We've done 2 rounds of sampling using residual funds from my contract to go out and collect samples. The purpose of the perimeter sampling is to get water that comes on the base and water on the off base, so that we have data documenting what's coming on, what's leaving, and can get baseline data. Next slide.
You said San Antonio, what is that?
That's AFCAC. That's the home office for the restoration program. It's out of San Antonio. The Air Force Civil
For
Engineers
USGS?
Center. No, Air Force. The folks I work for, the Air Force Civil Engineers Center.
What base is,
That's at Lackland.
that's Lackland, San Antonio, okay. Thank you.
Yep. So the perimeter monitoring has a much different data set that they're generating than what my USGS sampling has done. They have, in addition to PFAS, they've got a couple of other perfluorinated analyses that they're doing that are useful for fingerprinting studies and things like that. They're doing wastewater indicators, pesticides, and a lot of other chemical, just baseline data collection, so that we can look at what's coming towards the base and what's coming past the base. Next slide.
Isotopes, you mean radioactive things?
That would be, yeah.
radioids are different, not all. You're not worried about lots of licenses, right?
No, it's just background data, but it's part of the suite that they're analyzing for. Pardon me?
It's radioids.
As far as I know, yes. So in addition to USGS work, we've got a number of more standard contaminated site characterizations that are going on here at the base. We have completed one round of remedial investigation characterizations at buildings 25, 7995 complex, and building 59. Building 25 was a former wind tunnel where the anti-corrosion chemicals, it was a chromium solution, were released to the ground, and we are characterizing nature and extent. The site has already gone through 2 rounds of soil removal, and the remedial investigation is going to finish up the nature and extent characterization of that site, do risk assessments, and see what further actions are required. 7995 was a research set of research buildings here in Area B. The main contaminant at building 7995 is TCE. We're doing the final nature and extent step-out sampling at that site, and then we will move on to a feasibility study and determine what remedy is appropriate. Building 59 is a former research building here in Area B. Contaminated water was found inside building 59. The basements were flooded. It had TCE, and we are addressing groundwater contamination that exists at that site to define nature and extent and determine a remedy.
Contaminated with what?
TCE, solid.
Thank you.
Next slide. So just for kind of a picture, this is the wind tunnel site. The wind tunnel here, this is a depression. It's a walled depression. These are all concrete walls around here. So it was a release in this low-lying area that has had a couple of soil removals, and we're doing nature and extent characterization. Next slide. Building 7995 had a series of buildings in this area. There is an existing plume that we've got documented, and we're bounding nature and extent, and we've conducted a pilot treatment study there that was very successful, and I anticipate we'll do something similar to that once we finish up the RA and the FS stages and move on to a remedy. Next slide. And then building 59, former building 59 is actually located in a parking lot currently, and we have done a large number of wells in this parking lot, and we have some extent questions that remain out in here and towards building 23. Because this is a VOC, there are also questions about vapor intrusion of the TCE into the existing building. So we'll be collecting some additional data there to finish that characterization up and look at a remedy. Next slide. In addition to those, I am the military munitions program manager here at Wright-Pat. This slide shows the military munition sites that we have looked at here at Wright-Pat at various stages. The 2 remaining sites that need to be characterized are the former skeet range, which is here by the golf course in Area A. And then there was a former practice bombing range on the actual airfield area that we have done work. Both of these sites went through remedial investigations and began FSs. Each of those sites had issues. The golf course had a construction activity that disturbed the soils that we had characterized, which resulted in us needing to go back out and do a supplemental RI to collect a representative data set of the site so that we can finish characterization. The practice bombing, and that's the next step here, is we've finished a work plan for this site, and we will be mobilizing probably this year to collect the additional samples to redo the RI work that was disturbed.
The ski range, what did you find?
The skeet range has lead shot naturally, and then we have semi-volatile compounds that are associated with how the clay pigeons are constructed, the tar substances that bind the clay pigeons. So you have PAHs and lead. And then at the bombing range, what we found was there was an anomaly in this corner of the site that geophysics did not step out and fully delineate the size of the anomaly, and so we are going out maybe this late fall, if everything falls in line. We're wrapping up the work plan right now and seeing whether or not we can get mobilized to conduct additional geophysical surveys and come up with a supplemental remedial investigation report.
What does anomaly mean?
So they do basically metal detector surveys over the site to look for metal debris from the bombs. And they had a high density of metal debris in this area. And in the previous work that was done, they did not step out until they fully bounded the limits of that high density metal debris.
But nobody finally found the bullseye, huh?
Well, time will tell what the new surveys tell us. But yeah, there was an anomaly that they didn't step out far enough from, so we didn't have a good decreasing trend away from that anomaly. So we need to collect more data to make sure that we've collected all the data that we need to.
In between those two sites, there's 110-acre wildflower present.
Right in here, the Huffman Prairie, and there's a big field in here too, yes.
Is any of that, is there any bad stuff found in or around the edges of or on that?
So the skeet range, we don't really have big issues. We know the limits of the shotfall, and we don't need to do any additional data gathering in this portion. And the bomb range, this area is bounded well. This portion here is bounded well. It is this part right here, this corner, that we need to get additional data so that we can say that we have bounded the limits of the activities.
And draw your red line around that 100-acre.
You talking about this area here? Or are you talking about Huffman Prairie out in here?
Huffman Prairie, yeah, so there's
Where
no,
the Wright brothers had, there's the building out there where they had their
Yep.
fight, and then just to the northwest of that is this 100-acre wild state nature preserve.
yeah, so
Where's
there's
that?
no contamination into the prairie.
Huffman Prairie is right here. This is the road that goes past the skeet range. And this is the road, where is the, yeah, and then this is the road that goes back. The hangar is right in here, I believe.
Okay,
So I have no restoration sites out here.
okay.
Yeah, the turn is northeast, I think, of the hangar.
And has any sampling been done in that 100-acre?
I have no processes that would tell me that I need to go sample out there. I don't have any historical indication that there's something to go looking
Nobody's
for.
ever looked, huh?
Not without knowing there was a facility there or something. It was the historical Wright brothers. It isn't someplace where we had a research building.
Contaminated groundwater hasn't moved under there.
So by the processes that we do things, we characterize a site and we bound plumes from sites that we know have got releases. And we don't have any plumes that go out there that we're chasing.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we always have to track our work back to a documented site so that we can get funds to do work. So it's working out and bounding contamination away from sites. And there's nothing out actually in the prairie that would lead me to go and start a project.
You're checking the right area, because that's where the bombing was.
Yep, they didn't, the original work, did not step out far enough, so we need to go back and we need to make sure
You
that,
seem to be in the right place.
that
I
we
know
put-
the EOD guys found a 500-pound bomb in 2018, 2019, into that runway to the south.
yep, and we will go out, we will mark those anomalies and we will investigate them and address them as we find them and determine what needs to be done with each particular
I
one.
never heard anything about the prairie being contaminated.
No, the prairie's kind of way out of where we've had operations that need to be investigated.
Hey, John, can you clarify, like you said, 500-pound bomb? It was a practice bomb, not, 500 pounds of warhead, right? It was a dummy, probably a 5-pound charge or something, just to go, get off smoke when they dropped it.
I can't recall. It's been about 5 years ago.
Gotcha. But yeah, so and John, can you clarify, these are dummy rounds, just practice?
The practice bombing range was for people to go out and take cement-filled bombs, drop them. They will typically have a black powder charge in there so that you can see a puff of smoke where the impacts happen. But at the same time, we did find unexpected constituents at the sites that make us going out and looking at this anomaly area something that we're happy to do because it's work that needs to be done. So, next slide. So this just kind of summarizes what we've got going on at MU 897. I already talked it on the previous slide. Next slide. Same thing for the skeet range. We'll be doing additional soil sampling and preparing a report to lead us into a feasibility study after the RI phase is done. Next slide. And then other projects. So we have a feasibility study amendment going on at landfill 512. That's a site next to building 13, next to a forensics project. We are doing a data gap investigation. The field work's been completed. That was some additional drilling out, basically down gradient of landfill 5 out on Huffman Prairie. Not Huffman Prairie, but MCD property to do some additional bounding of the TCE plume that's associated with landfill 5.
Who's MCD?
Miami Conservancy District. That's the property right outside the fence along the Mad River.
Yep.
And then we've got the base-wide long-term groundwater monitoring program. That's ongoing. That's something that will continue for the foreseeable future. Additionally, Wright-Pat has a contract going on right now that came out of the San Antonio folks that is a contract to look at non-firefighting foam related releases of PFAS. It's due diligence on our part to look at processes at the base and inventories to decide if there are sites that require further investigation. A draft has come out. It is not final, and I don't know, is there anything else we need to mention about that right now, Joe?
No, but it will, I do believe you guys are gonna get provided a copy for review.
What are the other potential activities on the base that might have resulted in the PFAS?
For example, car washes possibly.
Okay.
There's
Vehicle cleaning?
Car washes, metal plating facilities. There was a document that came out by Gaines from US EPA that looked at PFAS chemicals and identified a laundry list of processes. We looked at that document and relied heavily on that document to start to assess various non-firefighting related potential sources that need to be confirmed or denied about whether or not we need to be concerned that a release is taking place.
paint shops are another one.
Yeah, that's it.
Did you say metal plating?
Metal plating operations, car washes, paint booths.
Yep, herbicides, pesticides,
So
landfills.
what kind of general, what would be the significant chemicals? in the
Waxes. In paint or car washes?
plating?
Plating, they use it to control fumes on the plating vats for hexachrome plating that they do.
So it's chrome 6 probably on.
Well,
PFAS
it's the this is related to PFAS uses, is what the due diligence is.
But is anybody looking at dribbles and spills in the plating lab?
Well, within a plating lab that did not release to the environment, that would be handled as a spill response and cleaned up before it's released to the environment. The things that we're looking at relative to due diligence are processes that would have resulted in releases to the environment. So a facility that had an oil water separator that potentially, it would be connecting the dots for us.
Strictly PFAS.
This due diligence is for PFAS.
Other
Well,
than,
there's somebody here,
the.
there's somebody here that works for the Air Force that says that we have or have not ever looked for spills, chrome and stuff like that from that site.
So we have, an example of that would be my Building 25 site, which actually is a chrome site where we identified that there were chromates used and there was potential that they were released to the environment, and we have investigated that.
You have investigated that?
Yeah, Building 25 is an active characterization site. That chrome was released. We're doing nature and extent, and we'll determine, we've already conducted 2 soil removals at that site. And we're doing the details to get the nature and extent nailed down so that we can determine final remedies and what sort of risk is left at the site. And then the last one is San Antonio has a project that is coming out to collect additional PFAS samples specifically related to fingerprinting PFAS and looking at where release sites are and potentially how they've moved, maybe where they interact, and there's multiple plumes coming together. But that site is specifically geared towards collecting data to do PFAS fingerprinting studies.
And background.
Oh, and background, yes, Joe, that's correct. And that is the last of the presentations. Any questions?